Welcome to the first and final word with your host, Nelson Jordan.
Hey, how you doing, Chris? It's a wonderful time to be here again. This is our second episode. I'm excited for all the audience of what we're going to discuss today with the NFC East, and can't wait to chop it up even more today. So, yeah, Chris, I'm excited.
Absolutely. I cannot wait to get into this one. I'm Chris Nelson. Today, as Nelson said, we are going to be just doing our NFC East Division preview, and we will start with the defending Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles. Nelson, you have the first word.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, the Super Bowl champion Eagles, huh? So last year they were the best roster on paper, and it's amazing what Howie Roseman has done with these Philadelphia Eagles for the last couple of years, especially with Jalen Hurts, and ever since they got him, they've been to multiple Super Bowls, and under his regime they've been able to pick up two now. So the Philadelphia organization can finally say, hey, we're not the laughing stock of the NFC East. They're trying to catch up, right, with the rest of the team. So yeah, well, what's definitely excited to be a Philadelphia fan going into next year is that you have Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley had a hell of a year last year. We can all agree on that. He had an MVP caliber type year, and frankly, I mean that was at the assistance too of a heck of an O line, and that offense too. That's a juggernaut with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts being able to scramble, create plays on his own. So I mean, like I said, best on paper overall, top to bottom. And don't forget about that defense as well. That defense is just amazing, what Howie Roseman has done. Be able to pick up a couple of rookies and turn them into interception machines, and be able to replace Bradbury and their other corner. So
Okay.
Darius Slay.
Yeah, he's
So
with
yeah,
them on
they
two.
were
He's
able to
moved on.
replace both those guys with rookies, and they
Yeah.
balled last year. And DeGene, I mean, look what he did. He picked out Mahomes in the Super Bowl and took that to the house. So Harry Roseman, man, you cannot talk enough good things about him and what he's done for that organization. So, but let's get really deep into it with these Eagles. They were 14-3, first in the NFC East. As again, they won their second Super Bowl against versus the Chiefs. They had some major coaching changes. Their offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, is now officially with the New Orleans Saints uh, as the head coach over there. Kevin Batulu, he is now promoted to OC from within the organization, and he's been within the Eagles organization since 2021. So he knows this offense. He knows what Sirianni likes. He knows Hurts. He knows pretty much, Philadelphia football. So I wouldn't be shocked if much changes. However, I will mention a few things later on in the podcast that I do have some questions, even with Patullo. They do got some player changes that I do want to address. They were able to add a couple of cool, good pieces for depth position per se. Aziz Ojulari, they were able to get out of New York. They were also able to get Patrick Johnson. He's a wonderful depth piece out of the New York Giants as well. They were able to also add another speed receiver, I would say, but more so he's the punt returner from Atlanta, Avery Williams. So they again, Howie Roseman just doing what he likes to do, be able to constantly upgrade little by little at every single position if he can to make them the fastest team possible and the most physical team. However, that's not to say that they didn't lose any good players either, because they did. And that Super Bowl, they kind of was the big showcase for some of these players as well. Milton Williams, defensive end, he's now with the New England Patriots. Josh Sweat, defensive end, look at the crazy game he had against Kansas City. He was all over Mahomes, for God's sakes. And Mahomes took a big hit from him, if I can recall. I think it was in the fourth quarter. So he's now with the Arizona Cardinals, as you mentioned earlier, and I forgot his name, Darius Slay. He is now with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Isaiah Rodgers, that's a good depth piece that they lost, in my opinion. He's now with the Minnesota Vikings. But the one name that really sticking out like a sore thumb, and I think Philly fans can kind of agree that this could come back to bite them if it is the case. Mekhi Becton, their right guard. He's an excellent guard. He's got a lot of upside. He's got a lot of talent. I mean, what he was able to do and fulfill temporarily the role for one of their starting guards coming down to injury, and what he did in the playoffs, excellent, excellent player. And I got to give credit, and I know you'll talk about it a little bit, Chris. But again, Howie Roseman and how he's able to draft these players and literally groom them is absolutely ridiculous. And he's now with the Chargers, Mekhi Becton. So again, some of these players do stand out, but again, Howie Roseman's always just making changes on the fly, and he's always upgrading this team no matter how he does it. They were able to draft a couple of key notables as well. Jahad Campbell, linebacker of Ohio State with the 31st overall pick. Physical guy. He can play the run very well. He's got good awareness when it comes to some zone play as well. So he's a good added piece to that front seven for the Philadelphia Eagles. Andrew Makuba, safety out of Texas with the 44th overall pick as well. That is another promising young player that's going to come into this league and hopefully can fulfill the shoes of now C.J. Gardner-Johnson now that he's left Philadelphia as well. So, again, credit to Howie Roseman. This guy, he's been literally grooming this team for the last couple of years, and they're a juggernaut. And I don't want to say that nothing has changed, but even if there is a slight dip, it's very slight. It's not that much. But they're still the best team on paper, in my opinion, and I'll hand it off to you for your word on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to start with Howie Roseman. I mean, look, this guy started his career at the beginning of the millennium with the Eagles. He's cut his teeth in the organization. He's grown up in this organization throughout the 2000s. He was given the opportunity to be the general manager. He worked his way up to that. When they chose to move on from Andy Reid, they handed the reins over to Chip Kelly, and they essentially made him the de facto GM and pushed Howie Roseman to the side. Look, credit to the organization for keeping Howie Roseman around throughout that, and also to Howie Roseman for sticking around throughout that time. And after a successful first season under Chip Kelly, things fell apart due to some disastrous moves he made, and they went back to Howie Roseman, and within a couple of years, he turned them into Super Bowl champions. I mean, he has just done a tremendous job. And now we've seen the way they have gotten to the Super Bowl and won it is football games are won and lost in the trenches. That's what they have focused on. That offensive line and the defensive line have consistently been tremendous. You talked about drafting and development as well as bringing in free agents. They've done an exceptional job with that, a great job with coaching.
Right.
So, absolutely. Now, you did mention that Kellen Moore is now the head coach of New Orleans. That has been the trend that each time they've gotten to the Super Bowl, they have lost their offensive coordinator to a head coaching job, and each time they have
Mm-hmm.
promoted someone who was already on the staff to the role of offensive coordinator. It
Yep.
has not gone that well the previous two times, especially a couple of years ago. It was a disaster. They were too determined to throw the ball for some reason. I mean, they would rip off a 6, 7 yard run and then throw the ball and throw an incomplete pass and just derail the drive. When the
Yep.
Eagles are at their best, they run the ball. You talked about Saquon Barkley and how good he has been. But let's start with the offensive line. You lose your perennial first team All Pro center, Jason Kelsey. All you do to replace him is simply slide over your right guard, Cam Jurgens, and all he does is make the Pro Bowl. I mean, what a
Oh
job. That's
yeah.
such a tough act to follow, and he comes in and has that type of season. Now you have to replace him at right guard, so they go out and get left tackle Mekhi Becton. Think he's a huge guy. We'll just stick him in there and he'll just be a mauler. It worked. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
have all the faith in
Yeah.
the world in Howie Roseman. Just the job he does with these guys, plug and play. You have a perennial Pro Bowl left guard in Landon Dickerson, and they have the best tackle tandem in the league. These guys are outstanding. I mean, they a lot like a Shanahan offense, these running backs felt like they were on assembly lines. Just plug and play. They turn them into a Pro Bowler. They go out and have a great season. But like Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers went out and got Christian McCaffrey. They went out and got their guy, their fast, elusive back, and Saquon Barkley. You have that offensive line allowing him to consistently get to the second level. And once he's there with his speed and elusiveness, all he does is break off long touchdown runs. I mean, the season he had was unbelievable, and it just took that offense to another level. Just exceptional. And it forces teams to have to load up the box to stop the run. And when you finally do, now you have to worry about Jalen Hurts, who is a great runner himself with his speed, athleticism, and strength. And you have to deal with that. So you need to contain him and prevent that happening. Forces you to play one-on-one coverage on the outside. And as you mentioned, they have AJ Brown. Good luck covering that guy one-on-one. I mean, it just doesn't work out well. And then if you do attempt to double team him and take away the run, you have Devontae Smith in one-on-one coverage, and all likelihood with a lackluster cornerback, and he's good enough more often than not to win that matchup. So to consistently
Yeah.
stop that offense is so difficult. Obviously, a big question with the offensive coordinator. So we'll see in that regard, but just run the ball. And every offensive play card, hear that. Run the ball until the defense stops it. Do not bail the defense out by throwing the football. When you throw the football, only three things can happen, and two of them are bad. So let's make sure we're building momentum with our play calling. But to flip it over to the defensive side of the ball, where they do have a little bit more continuities, they lost Hassan Reddick. They didn't really replace him, but they did have Jalen Carter, who turns into a megastar, as we could see he was going to. He was more or less their Fletcher Cox replacement, a little bit different player, a little more versatile, but what a season he had, and how good is he? And then at the next level, the linebackers, they go out and take a reserve rotational edge rusher from New Orleans who spent years there in Zach Bond, move him inside to inside linebacker, and all he does is as good a linebacker as there is in the league. I mean, the season he had was unbelievable. Every game, he's just racking up so many tackles and making so many massive impact plays. You could just count
Yeah,
on it when you're watching the Eagles. You're going to see a massive impact player, and a lot of times more than one from Zach Bond. And I mean, it was just unbelievable for an inside linebacker to do what he did, especially under the circumstances of moving
right.
inside and that being new to him. And then in the secondary, James Bradbury gets hurt before the season and misses the entire year. And they drafted two cornerbacks and they just plug and play them as rookies, and it works out great, as you mentioned. So it really is amazing the job that Harry Roseman, that front office, Nick Sirianni, who's a great coach, proven to be, and that coaching staff and the entire organization has done, and just plug
Mhm.
and play with these players. I have nothing but optimism that they can lose Mekhi Becton and the next guy up at right guard is going to make it work. The only concern I have would be two concerns would be with the new offense coordinator because that hasn't gone so well for them, and with the fact that we haven't seen a repeat division champion in the NFC East in over 20 years since the Eagles themselves won four straight and went to four straight NFC championships, capped off with the Super Bowl appearance from 2001 to '04. That is remarkable. The parity in this division, as fun as it is a little bit concerning. And so, if history tells us anything, those two things are bad signs for the Eagles. But there's no denying, as you said, they have the most talented roster in the division, and we expect that aspect to continue. So maybe they're the team to finally buck the trend. We'll find out. And Nelson, I'll pass back over to you for the final word on this.
Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback off what you said a little bit more. Can't give more credit to Howie Roseman and what he's done, and he's able to find these hidden, gemstones in the ground and being able to, or needle in the haystack per se. I mean, with like you said, with Zach Bond, I mean, that's just a remarkable story. I mean, he was essentially just kind of like a walk-on, essentially, right? To most people, what they would think to the Saints, and now he's literally a top five linebacker in his position. I mean, it's remarkable how his expertise just as a player development is just, so good. And, as a Washingtonian fan, especially with the Commanders, Redskins, it's tough because now we got to deal with that guy in Philadelphia for the next, decade or so until something bad happens per se, if it does, but or he retires. But let me discuss again also with what you were saying. Run the ball. This is my saying literally with the Eagles. Run, Barkley, run. If you guys get the little quote, "Run, Forrest, run," that's what the Eagles need to do. Right? They were eighth in total offense. A big portion of it because they were second in the rushing attack with 184.1 yards per game on the ground. However, their passing game was a little lackluster. I think a lot of folks here, nationally and to all those that, podcast, sports, etc., can arguably agree that there was something missing when it came to their passing attack. Now, granted, it didn't necessarily mean that they were not efficient on offense. It's just that we were not accustomed to that prior, before Barkley came in. And, they were such a deep team when it came to throwing the ball, lighting you up, AJ Brown dominating games left and right. And if it's not him, it's Devontae Smith. Then you got Dallas Goedert at the tight end position, catching balls over the middle, converting first downs. So, I mean, they have so many players that Jalen Hurts can throw the ball to. So to kind of see that much of a drop off from being such a type 10 offense per se in the passing game to where they were last year, it does give a reason for possible pause. And hopefully their offensive coordinator can kind of maybe band-aid this a little bit and have an improvement per se. Because if they can improve in any way of the passing attack, I think they could possibly have an unstoppable offense at this point. It's going to take a shootout to possibly beat these Eagles. And like you were mentioning too, with their defense, number one overall total defense, second in pass defense, fourth in rushing and defense, and they were ninth in third down conversions per game. So this defense was just suffocating every single game. Granted, they were in some shootouts, maybe with the Commanders, and on top of that, in postseason play with the Los Angeles Rams, excuse me. And what Jalen Carter did in that game to close out that game to get the Eagles to the NFC Championship game. Bravo. That was a MVP type caliber performance. And he stepped up big time in the last couple of plays. For everyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, rewatch those highlights. Watch literally everyone thought, and I was actually thinking too, I thought the Rams were about to go and score and take this game. But Lord behold, Carter comes out of nowhere and he's like breaking these guys open, and he's just completely in the face of Stafford for the last couple of plays, and Stafford's got nowhere to go. Mind you, it's snowing, but still, I mean, what an incredible performance on his part. So, again, these players that Howie Roseman got, I mean, these guys are playing nonstop down to the final play, and you got to give credit to him for finding such talent, because unbelievable what Philly has going on right now. The second thing also that I want to bring up about these Eagles too is, look, let's be honest, the tush push is almost unstoppable. But you know what? You got to be able to talk about it. You got a quarterback, that can squat over 600 pounds. Same thing with the running back, and you got an offensive line that literally just moves, literally defensive lines like they're freaking. I don't want to even say the sleds. They're moving them like they're moving buildings. It's ridiculous. These guys
They're
just
massive.
I'm telling you, and for for 3 downs to get a first down. No, when you're playing the Eagles. You're playing 4 downs.
First down, yeah.
You're playing 4 downs against the Eagles offense. That's all it is.
Yeah, you
seriously
get close and you got it.
Yeah. So the only way you're playing 3 downs against the Eagles is if you put them in 3rd and long. Otherwise, if that's 4th and 2, 4th and 1, forget it. The tush push is coming.
Doing it against
or their brotherly shove. Exactly. So, and also, you got to talk a little bit more too about their defense, because Vic Fangio, my God, what a job. Defensive. Yeah, he put a heck of a job with these Eagles all year long, putting them in literally, I think, the bread and butter, which is most defensive coordinators would like to do, 4 or 5 man rush, and literally everybody drop back in the zone or man coverage, and literally say, you know what, we're going to get to you, but you're going to have to beat us with any of our zone coverages. And by God, were their players on playing zone? They were tight. They were aware of where the ball was going. They were batting down balls. If not, they were intercepting the ball. So, they got an excellent secondary, a very young secondary, I might add, as well. So, these Eagles are going to be the Eagles for quite a while. So, for the Commanders, the Cowboys, and the Giants, these guys are not going away anytime soon. So the questions I do have quickly to finish this up before we change over to the next team. So for me personally, will we see the offense to continue to look the same? Personally, I understand that Barkley is the focal point of the Philadelphia Eagles. However, again, their passing game, there's a lot that's left to be desired. If they can somehow improve again with the passing game, I think they can be an unstoppable force, because history is going to tell everybody, and I'm going to share this with the last word of the day later on in this podcast. It's not looking good for Saquon Barkley to continue the same season that he had at a record high. I will note that. So that information will come later today. Will they have a Super Bowl hangover? Granted, a lot of teams, whether they win the Super Bowl or they don't also win, the Super Bowl, there is a little bit of a hangover going in, right? Because you have exerted so much energy. There's a lot of physical toll on the body, and to be able to return on a much, quicker time frame than most other folks, between whether it's OTAs, training camp, etc., to be able to come back and redo it again, that is a little bit of a possible hangover that could come. And also, their schedule is going to be much tougher this year, because the NFC East is playing the AFC West and the NFC North, 2 of the better divisions in football. So,
and by winning the division, they have to play all the top teams, the reigning division champions. Yep.
Exactly. So, again, will they have a Super Bowl hangover? That's yet to be seen, but there are reasons to possibly think about it. And even if they get back to the Super Bowl in 2025, again, they're going to have to show a lot. They might be the best team on paper in the NFC, period.
Yeah.
However, because of that stiffer competition, barring injuries, how much of a change are we going to see to what you said earlier with Kevin Patulu, with this offense? How good can this offense keep them going even once they get to the Super Bowl? Because we don't know his scheme just yet, right? But we also know that the biggest threat piece is Barkley. But if Barkley does not, per se, have the same height of his achievement of last year, and that passing game does not improve, and yet somehow they stumble into the playoffs and they stumble into the Super Bowl, will they even repeat at that point? That's also going to be yet to be seen. So that is a big mystery in my opinion. But again, I think they're still the best roster on paper in the NFC. So I'm going to give them the best chance to make it to the NFC Championship game and beyond to the Super Bowl. So Chris, we got to talk about next the Washington Commanders. You got the first word.
Absolutely. And look, and I know how excited you were about this. All the credit in the world to the Washington Commanders fans. Congratulations to you all for getting to enjoy that. They got to the NFC Championship and won at least a dozen games in the regular season, both for the first time in 33 years since the last time they won the Super Bowl. That is an unbelievable streak that finally came to an end for one of the most dedicated fan bases in the league and what was one of the proudest franchises in the league. New ownership, new GM, first year head coach, rookie quarterback. They had Bobby Wagner on the defensive side of the ball. We'll get a bit more into some of the returners who had a big impact for them. But outstanding job to go out and win 12 games in the regular season that make that run to the NFC Championship. That was awesome for them.
Yes,
And looking at the
absolutely.
team, absolutely. Looking at the team, they have Cliff Kingsbury back as their offensive coordinator and Joe Witt Jr. back as a defensive coordinator. So for continuity purposes, that's outstanding. You've got Terry McLaurin, who's one of the best wide receivers in the league. He's just tremendous, the best player in that offense. Again, they had the rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels, who put together a really good rookie season and is a really good dual threat quarterback. So he's a weapon in that regard. You have some good running backs. Austin Eckler deserves being mentioned. He's a great return man, though, so he usually sets them up in good position to be able to have field position to be able to have a successful drive on offense and also benefit the defense if they do wind up punting. They can have them backed up, the other opposing offense backed up. They add a couple of big time pieces. So they had Debo Samuel. Now, the big issue with Debo Samuel and where the questions might start to come in with the Commanders this season is he simply can't stay healthy. Now, we know when he is healthy, and you get him out with the ball in space, he is so strong and so powerful. It is so difficult for defenders to get him on the ground. He will make guys miss, he breaks tackles like crazy, and it leads to a lot of extra yards and big plays. But that physical style of play has also led to a lot of injuries for him. He misses games every single season, and it seems to be taking a toll on him. He last year he didn't look like the player he was. If they're getting somewhere close to the Debo Samuel we saw 4 years ago when he was first team All Pro and really looked like as good a receiver and offensive player as there was in the league, then that is immediately a huge boost to the Commanders opposite Terry McLaurin, who we know is going to attract so much attention. It gives Jaden Daniels another big time weapon. But are the Commanders going to utilize him and be able to give him the same opportunities he had in that Shanahan offense out in San Francisco? Is he going to be able to stay healthy? And is what we saw last season more of what he is now, or is he going to be able to be closer to the player he was? So there's a lot of questions there, a lot of potential upside, but also some concerns. They also have perennial Pro Bowl left tackle Laramie Tunsil. As good as Laramie Tunsil was in Houston and has been, he does tend to make a lot of bad plays, and that is the concern for him. Now he moves to a new team and a new conference. Can he continue to have the highs that he's had and be as good as he's been, or are we going to see more of the negatives? Does he fit as well here? There's some question marks there as well. We don't know that we're going to get the same Laramie Tunsil. So I think that's where some of the questions start with the Commanders. There's also the fact that, look, this team played, including the playoffs, 20 games last season. 13 of them were one possession games. That is unheard of. It's truly remarkable. They won 9 of those. Oftentimes, when you see a team have something like that, it will flip to the other side of it the next season, and they won't win as many of those close games. They won't play in 13 close games again. I think we can count on that, not even close. But it's the NFL. You're going to play some close games. They tend to lose a lot more of those, and they also tend to get beaten badly in a lot of games. look, we'll see what happens in that regard. Maybe they'll buck that trend. We've seen other teams be able to do it, but more often than not, that's what we see. But it was truly amazing. I mean, they really were the cardiac commanders. You look at them at the end of games, especially at the end of season and end of the regular season in that first playoff game. They were just winning games. It almost felt like on miracles. I mean, game after game, you had the Hail Mary against the Bears earlier in the season.
Yeah.
And then yeah, that starts the end when they got in the win streak got hot. I mean, they were just finding ways to win games at the end. It was really exciting to watch. It was great. A lot of
It
fun.
was insanity at the stadium, and I was there. It was
I can
insanity, complete
imagine. Oh
insanity.
yeah. Oh yeah. It does have to be mentioned the playoff first playoff game when they played beat the Bucks, and all the credit in the world for to them for doing that. But the Bucks, these two teams played in the opener, and the Bucks took it to them, and they had Chris Godwin at that time. They did not have him in the playoff game, and the Bucks made mistakes in that playoff game that may have cost them the game. They have beaten themselves as much as they got beat by the Commanders. So it has to be mentioned in that regard that maybe have a little bit of hesitation in the Commanders. When they went to Detroit, all the credit in the world to them for winning that game. But the Lions, as we've mentioned before, were decimated by injuries on defense. So that really hurt their ability to stop the Commanders. And we saw what happened when they did get to the NFC Championship. And look, the Eagles were doing that to everyone all year, including the Commanders when they played in Philadelphia in the regular season. But I mean, they put
Yep.
a beat down on the Commanders. They scored a record number of points for a conference championship. I believe for an NFC championship, it may have been both. I mean, it was bad. It got ugly fast. And again, the Eagles were so good. We just talked about that. So that has to be acknowledged. So it just feels like the Commanders could be a team that regresses. But on paper, they look like they got better. And then, as I mentioned before, we haven't seen a repeat division in the champion of the division for over 20 years. So it
Hmm.
feels like the Commanders may be the next team up. The door might be open for them. The Eagles lose their offensive coordinator. We haven't seen that repeat champion in the division. So maybe they are the next up. So it feels like they are in position to regress potentially from what we've seen historically with teams that had the season. Not to mention, this franchise for those 33 years has not put together good back to back seasons. So if history tells us anything, it's that we might not be able to count on and bet on the Commanders necessarily. So that has to be noted to give a little bit of cautious optimism for Commanders fans because I know looking at it on paper and how things are, it's very exciting. But they potentially could take a step back based on what we've seen. And until they are able to put together back to back good seasons, I don't think we're going to believe it, even with the new ownership, better coaching the situation. They're a little reminiscent of where they were 12 years ago. There's a lot of significant differences, but there are some similarities. So that does have to be noted. But Nelson, I know you have some good information on this, so please hit us with it.
So, yes. So, is everybody still not aware? Yes, I'm a Commanders fan. I'm a Washingtonian. I follow all the Washington teams. So this is the team that I grew up with and beloved team. But I'm not gonna talk it from a biased standpoint. So, to what Chris you were saying, especially with the Commanders and what they had done to kind of improve the roster and whatnot. Yes, the addition I think with Debo is a wild card. He's an X factor for this offense going forward, in my opinion. Will he stay healthy? I think what possibly Kingsbury and the rest of the coaching staff are probably going to have to understand is you're not going to be able to run Debo, not I don't want to say full speed every single game, but his workload has to be like, I want to say kind of ceilinged per se, right? At a ceiling. And they have a lot of depth at receiver. It's not like they can't bring him out for a couple of plays here and there, but he doesn't have to be per se the main focal point what he was in San Francisco. His technical backup was Luke McCaffrey. Luke McCaffrey's not a bad backup to Depot at all. Luke McCaffrey had his moments, and especially in Cincinnati and that Monday Night Football game, and then some other games too, where he's converting key third downs. And there's actually a crazy stat, and a lot of times it was brought up on PFT on NBC. They were talking about how Luke McCaffrey had one of the highest separation rates for a receiver against nickel corner or dime coverage throughout the year. So I think the coaching staff is going to recognize that, and I don't think we're necessarily going to see Debo being exponentially used at the rate that he was used in San Francisco. So hopefully that'll mitigate the fear of him getting injured. But to your credit, he is injury prone. So you can only control so much chaos with that. I think they did improve the offensive line. So they're probably going to end up kicking their starting left tackle last year. Coleman, he's probably going to come inside. You're probably going to have either Wiley go inside because now you drafted Josh Connerly, who Laramie Tunsil, to what you were just saying, he was actually getting very high praise already in the OTAs. And Tunsil, also, I agree with you as well. Tunsil, he's an excellent pass protector, but when it comes to his rush
Mhm.
contributions, he is not one of the premier offensive tackles in the game. So hoping that that can get better a little bit, but with the having the ability of Jaden Daniels having to open up the defense because they understand that, hey, listen, I can't do a 46 defense and expect Jaden Daniels to not either do a pistol fake or roll out, whatever. So that will probably make his grade overall probably a little bit better just because you have that much of a mobile quarterback. Because let's be honest, Jaden Daniels is way more mobile than CJ Stroud is. Okay. And to kind of feed off also on the offense of what I was talking about, so these guys have an excellent offense. You kind of talked about it a little bit. They were fifth in total offense. They were third and third down conversions at almost six a clip. Where there is to be desired is their defense. Their defense was definitely lacking last year. And I'm going to bring up a point too that, again, to what you were saying earlier, the type of opponents that they were facing last year was not the cream of the crop, first of all. They were facing a lot of fourth place teams. They were facing a lot of third place teams. And if anything else, they were facing a backup quarterbacks, and the majority of them or second string quarterbacks for the second half of the year. So these guys got to improve on defense. And I'll be honest, they have to improve on defense because the rush defense was anemic at times. You can't have your all starting defensive linemen out there and expect them to essentially play, 40, 50, 60 downs a game and expect them to not get hurt. And that's exactly what happened to Deron Payne. Payne was, he did his job. He was able to help the defense towards the end of the year and kind of help alleviate, especially when our head coach and defensive coordinator put up a game plan as a wrinkle to bring him at defensive end because he is versatile. So give credit to Dan Quinn for thinking of that. So, but again, these guys got to come up with a way so that way they're not able to put so much pressure on their starters. So as I was mentioning, their defensive line, they were able to add a few good pieces. They were able to add Dietrich Wise, Javon Kinlaw. And Javon Kinlaw, he's also a wild card too from San Francisco. So Javon Kinlaw, he was drafted under Peters and company over there. So and not that many people wanted even Javon Kinlaw to begin with, even in free agency. So maybe Peters knows something about Javon Kinlaw that most of the NFL doesn't know. So it'll be interesting to see what these guys do. And granted, I am excited for the season. I do have some expectations for them. But I think if they can somehow, maintain their offensive capabilities that they had last year, maybe improve a little better at the run game position, so that way, Daniels does not have to run all the darn time. Then I think they're going to be in more games than maybe people might expect this year, per se, even though they might be favored. There's still some teams that on paper could be better at certain positions than them. And I think having an offense might put them in shootouts. And there is one wrinkle I'm going to give you before I return this back to you. You were mentioning about how many close games that we were in. We cannot forget that also Jaden Daniels, when he was in LSU, I can't tell you how many times I saw LSU playing in college football, and they were in so many one possession or less than 10
Yeah.
point games. And Jaden Daniels was the reason why they won. So that alone, that experience, that be able to perform in crunch time has definitely translated from the college game to the NFL game. And it's a remarkable thing that he has done. A lot of these times when he's in these high profile games, it's amazing. You don't see him crumble. If anything, he lives up to the moment. And he did that in year one. So as a Washington fan base, we're only hoping that, hey, these guys can return and do the same this year, especially with stiffer competition, and hopefully we can keep this run going. So I'm going to give you the last word, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to talk a little bit about the defense, just to put a bow on the Commanders, because we didn't touch on them too much other than to state how they weren't exactly great. And look, Dan Quinn is a defensive minded guy. That was his pedigree. He came over from Dallas, defense coordinator there, did a tremendous job. He likes to play an aggressive style of defense, which I'm all for. Let's do that. They do have two outstanding linebackers, and of course, Bobby Wagner, who just year after year is so good, as well as Frankie Louvu, who had a heck of a season last year. Now, there could be a question mark there as well because Frankie Luvu had really a breakout season last year. Was that a one-off, or is that something he's going to continue? I would think more towards the latter. It looks like he's ascending and will continue to be that good, but it's still worth questioning with this team for reasons they might regress. And then, of course, Marshawn Lattimore at cornerback, and like Debo Samuel on offense, he just can't stay healthy. I mean, he misses so many games year after year at this point. So if he could actually somehow stay healthy and the injuries haven't taken their toll, as you mentioned with Debo Samuel on the other side of the ball, and can be the player he was a few years ago, he's a really good cornerback, and having him for the entire
Absolutely.
season
Yes.
would make a big difference for that defense. But we
Yep.
just don't know that he will be that guy, and he just can't be counted on to stay healthy from what we've seen to this point. But
hmm
look, I think there's reason to be excited for the Commanders based on what they are on paper, and there's also reason to think that maybe they will regress a little bit. So I get it if you're a Commanders fan, you're ready, like, hey, we're going to win the division. I think you probably feel that way with what the Eagles lost in its coordinator and how the parity has been in that division. But at the same time, so here's hoping that with the new ownership group, they're going in the right direction and will be more consistent and give us good football. So next up, we will talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Nelson, you have the first word.
These Dallas Cowboys. I can start off with a couple of jokes, accident waiting to happen, or they will never disappoint you when you least expect it. But no, that's not what I'm going to do with these Dallas Cowboys. As a matter of fact, I actually like it when the Dallas Cowboys are actually quite good. Well, and I think the NFC East needs them to perform up to standard a little bit this year to be able to, possibly return the NFC East into the NFC Beast, which normally that's what the NFC East is known for, right? With the Eagles, the Commanders, the Cowboys, the Giants, which we'll touch later. But yeah, so the Dallas Cowboys are 7-10, third in the NFC East. That's how they performed last year. No playoff berth. Sorry, Dallas. You did have quite a bunch of coaching changes. I'll name them. Mike McCarthy is now out. Brian Schottenheimer is now your head coach. He was promoted from offense coordinator. Clayton Adams was then promoted from within. He is now, or no, excuse me, he was actually the previous O-line coach for Arizona Cardinals. He is now your offense coordinator. And you took Matt Eberflus, who, besides his head coaching performance, he is actually recognized as one of the better defensive coordinators in the NFL. So that's not a bad pickup. So Matt Eberflus is now your D coordinator. They did add some players in the offseason. They did lose a few, and they did draft a couple of project players. I'll put it at best. So they were able to get George Pickens from Pittsburgh Steelers at a trade. They were also able to trade after for Joe Milton. That's interesting as a backup. I don't know if Joe Milton might be an upgrade over Cooper Rush, to be honest. So we'll see about that one. They were also able to fulfill the running back hole, I guess, in their eyes, with Javonte Williams. Now, coming out of college, Javonte had promise, but he didn't show much in Denver. So we'll see what he brings to the table. And they were able to return their pass rusher, Dante Fowler, who had a good season with the Commanders. He had about 10.5 sacks last year. So that's a good pickup for them. And they were able to re-sign Marquise Bell and Cavante Turpin. And Jesus, every time I hear Cavante Turpin, I can just remember the heck of a season he had in the XFL. My God, was he a man-child all over the field, just running past everybody. Holy smokes.
He is
So,
so fast.
yeah. I mean, Jesus H. Christ, he is fast. But no, granted, they added some pieces, but they also lost a couple of players that I don't agree. Maybe Jerry just didn't want to pull out the blank check. I don't know, or the checkbook. Excuse me. They they lost DeMarcus Lawrence to free agency to Seattle. Now, granted, DeMarcus Lawrence was injured last year. He did have a little bit of a fall off, but I mean, when healthy, he's still one of the better defensive ends in the game when it comes to stopping the run. Maybe not so pass rushing, but he can certainly stop the run. Rico Dowdle, who I actually fell in love with last year when he had the opportunity. Rico Dowdle, listen, this guy can play, especially coming out of the backfield and screen passes, catching the ball. He's quick and elusive. Rico Dowdle, he had his moments last year, so I'm kind of shocked that they let him walk out the door. Jordan Lewis, they lost him at corner. Deaf piece as well. He went to Jacksonville, and we got to address the elephant in the room. They lost their Hall of Fame guard, Zach Martin, so he finally retired. So that offensive line that once used to
Finally.
be one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, boy, oh boy, did they become here, and now they become here. So now they got some time to get back up to what that level was years ago. And Dallas fans, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So again, they were able to draft over, the time period. You guys seen them draft a couple of offensive linemen. That's what Jerry Jones loves to do. And they were able to draft Tyler Booker, guard out of Alabama. He had a lot of upside. I think Mel Kiper said that best in the ESPN NFL draft. The only thing that he's probably got to work on essentially is just to be more physical up front. He can move, but he's just got to be more physical, especially at the punch. And then they were all able to also draft, I think, a promising defensive end, pass rusher, and Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. So Jerry Jones was able to do some work in the NFL draft, but they're project players. So we'll see how they are able to contribute to the Dallas Cowboys and their season this year. Um, Let me touch base a little bit here with what they were last year. Dallas, I don't think I need to remind you how anemic your defense and offense was, period. But you did have at least a strong passing attack last year. You were 10th overall, and credit is due with CD Lamb. He's a top 3 receiver in this league. I mean, I remember watching him in games. This guy had so many games, I think, where he was maybe close to 150 or maybe more than a buck 150, 8, 9, 10 catches, even coming from Cooper Rush when Dak Prescott went down. So CeeDee Lamb is definitely, your heartbeat on that offense. As long as he stays on the field, defenses can't necessarily, attack necessarily up the middle. Because with him over the middle, he can easily turn a 15-yard dig route into a 70-yard bomb touchdown. That's what CD can do for you. Again, it's going to be interesting to see also what they're going to do with their offense as well with George Pickens. With the addition of him, he's a physical receiver. We know that he is excellent at the point of attack that can go catch the ball high up. But not that CD can't do that. I just think he's more physical, in my opinion. CD's a little bit more finesse, a little bit more slick, per se. They have an excellent tight end in Jake Ferguson that will contribute to the passing attack. But I think the elephant in the room in your offense has to be your rush game. Your rush game was 27th overall last year. And I think that was the biggest complaint for most Cowboy fans last year, that you guys really had no rush game last year. Let's be honest. And I think that's where, when I was referring to earlier, your offensive line was not as nearly as good as it was a couple of years ago. So for Dallas Cowboy fans, you guys know your offense will go as far as your offensive line will take you in this sense. So hopefully there is some improvement, and hopefully you guys can improve your rush game, because that would only help to protect Dak for one, because Dak did get hurt, if I remember correctly, in the Atlanta game. And Dak is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFC. He's not no scrub by any means. I've seen this guy play. He's as much as people want to laugh about him and make jokes that he's like Kirk Cousins 2.0. When he is on point, Dak is on point. He had an MVP caliber season for a reason a couple of years ago, which he was in the conversation. So as long as Dak can stay healthy, this team can be flirting with a wild card spot potentially, because Dak is always known to at least keep this team above water, at least 500 or above. So I think that's what's key for you guys, to bring the best at your offensive line play, so that way you guys can also benefit in so many other portions of your offense. And that way your defense doesn't have to be on the field and constantly be mauled by a rushing game on the opposing side. But with that said, Chris, I'll turn it over to you for your word.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the Cowboys' season last year in a lot of ways came down to the injuries, as you mentioned. They had a lot of players who were hurt and out, and Dak Prescott is the great quarterback. See, Lame got hurt at the end of the year. He's by far one of the best wide receivers in the league. As you said, add George Pickens opposite him. We'll see how that can maybe take some coverage away and how that can work out for both of them. Jake Ferguson, who's a really good tight end, as you mentioned, missed some games. The loss of Zach Martin, I agree with you, is massive. They drafted a guard to replace him. We will see how that works out. They do have Tyler Smith at left guard, who's very good. He's the one piece on that
Yeah,
offensive line who's very good. But I agree with you.
I
The
agree.
rest of that offensive line, especially center and the tackles, huge question marks. And then we'll see how it works out at right guard. And it's not just in recent years. The Cowboys, Jerry Jones has always done a great job with that offensive line. I mean, let's give Jerry
Hmm.
Jones a little bit of credit in that regard before I criticize him here for the coaching hire. He has managed to put a ton of Pro Bowl and All Pro talent consistently on the field for the Cowboys
Every
throughout his
year,
tenure. Yeah, I mean, you
every
go
year.
back to the Great Wall of Dallas. That offensive line's always been really good. You go back to
Yep.
that teams they had in the late 2000s. Absolutely. So we'll see what happens in that regard. But you choose to move on from Mike McCarthy. Okay, fair enough. But you don't bother to actually hire a coach. You just promote Brian Schottenheimer, the outs coordinator, to head coach. It was the most head scratching head coaching hire I've ever seen. It didn't even make sense. Maybe Brian Schottenheimer wasn't ready to be the head coach previously, and that's why you had Mike McCarthy in there and that worked. And he suddenly is now, and maybe it works out. I mean, I'm not going to act like we've never seen coordinators promoted to head coach and it works out, but I feel like more often than not, it doesn't. It just felt lazy and like you may as well have kept Mike McCarthy and have both of them. I just don't really see where they're going with that. Obviously, we'll see what happens, but and Jerry Jones really felt like an ego thing. Like, you know what? Screw it. I'm old. He came on and said, now everybody will know Brian Schottenheimer's name. He's the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, that's your justification for this move? You're just toying with everybody? Do you just not care? Winning and losing doesn't actually matter as long as Jerry Jones gets to have his name. I didn't get that at all. So I don't even know what to say in that. I agree with you. DeMarcus Lawrence feels like a big loss. He was hurt last year, but he's really good consistently year over year when he's healthy. You didn't mention Micah Parsons, who is by far one of the best edge rushers in the league. He missed some games last year with injury as well. He's exceptional. I mean, he's a big time difference maker for them. The other thing is, we finally, hopefully, will get to see to start the season and throughout the season those two cornerbacks, Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland, actually on the field together, maybe for every game. If that can happen, that's exciting. I want to finally get to see that and what that looks like because they've both been so good at times. They just haven't been on the field at the same time. So that could be one heck of a cornerback tandem. So there's some reason to believe, based on what we've seen for many years and what the Cowboys do have, they have the talent to be competitive and good. And maybe despite the coach can get it done, or maybe he is the right hire. But right now, head coach matters so much. And I am just not optimistic about the Dallas Cowboys because of that decision. And then I'm not going to be at all surprised when they wind up winning the division. So I'll give it to you for the final word, Nelson.
Yeah, I'm gonna get back to what you were saying earlier about Micah and Trayvon Diggs and whatnot, but there are some, questions that I do have and what we also know about this overall team. Now, Parsons, he is the best player on defense, yes, granted, but he's been exposed at times, and that exposed has been coming on that run defense. A lot of teams are now understanding that the best way to neutralize him, and pretty much every great pass rusher that's ever played, is you run right at them. And we've seen that, with I don't know if he was there when they played San Francisco in the wild card round. I think many was a couple of years ago, or even last year was the more glaring example, especially per se when they faced New Orleans and Alvin Kamara was cooking all game long in that game. I think he had 5 touchdowns to himself or something like that overall. So Micah is a great defensive pass rusher. He's great when the Dallas Cowboys can point the ears back and just go after the quarterback. But again, I think this team is going to be dependent on Dak staying healthy, and that way it'll benefit everybody else. But that'll trickle down to the offensive line and what they need to do. And if they can do that, then that's going to answer one of my questions. Then if they can get back to Dallas Cowboys football, because let's be honest, the NFC East loves it when it's game of the week on Fox or CBS or even on Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football. When you got the Dallas Cowboys playing the Washington Commanders, or Dallas Cowboys opening up this year against Philadelphia Eagles. So it'll be interesting to see what Dallas does. Philly, I wouldn't assume necessarily that, Dallas is just going to be a cupcake in this game. You
Biggest
know
brand in the
that,
sport, America's team.
yeah, that Dallas is going to come in, yeah, especially if they're all healthy, no injuries in training camp. I'm not saying don't be surprised, but I'm saying don't overlook them and look into the second week, because we know what Dak can do when he's on his A game. Second, can their defense get back to a top 10 level? You were mentioning, they got Trayvon Diggs. They have an excellent secondary with Donovan Wilson, Malik Hooker, and they also got Deron Bland, who's an excellent corner as well. Also, let's not forget too that they have their nose tackles, I believe Ziggy, and I forget who else too as well. So it's all going to be
Upside.
dependent on. It's also going to be dependent on these Cowboys, if they can stay healthy and they can somehow focus where Dak is maintaining the offense on the field, extending series, so that way their defense is not left to dry, and that way their defense is well rested, and they can attack the quarterback on the other side. If they can do that, they could possibly return to a top 10 defense. Do I believe that could happen 100%? No, because the type of opponents they're going to face this year is a lot fiercer competition. But they do have an opening. If anyone noticed, look at their opening schedule for the first 8 games. They could make a run. They're not. They don't have that many games where they're actually facing stiff competition. So in the first 8 games, if they can somehow pull out at least a 5-3, or per se even 4-4 at the bare minimum going into the second half, then they have a fighting chance. Um, so that'll answer my last question as well. So, will the Cowboys get to the playoffs? It wouldn't surprise me if they do, because as long as Dak stays healthy, they have a puncher's chance to get to the playoffs. Honestly. So, with that being said, let's get to the last team, the New York Football Giants. And Chris, you got the first word.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have very many positive things to say about the Giants. They're one of the oldest franchises in the league. They're in the biggest media market, and yet this organization is a absolute joke. I mean, year after year, they just do a terrible job. They went from a good team and Brian Dable's first year, who even won a playoff game. They then get crushed in the next round by their arch rival, Philadelphia Eagles, dropped down to 6-11 the next season, and then this past season all the way down to 3-14. And for some inexplicable reason, they bring Brian Dable back as head coach. I mean, if there's ever a guy who deserves to be fired, that's justification for firing someone right there. I get it. He was coach of the year his first season. It hasn't gone well since then. Everything has gone downhill. Move on. And I just think it makes the future so bleak because you're so bad at 3-14 that it's hard to imagine you can get. You can't exactly get worse. You're likely going to get better, which means you're likely going to keep him another year. And at some point in time, it just feels like things are going to fall backwards. Now, in terms of what they have
Mm-hmm.
done to try to make things better, look, we'll start with the fact that they do have Malik Neighbors. 10 years ago, they had Odell Beckham Jr., who they had taken out of LSU. They do the same thing with Malik
Right.
Neighbors. NFL front offices, if you want a star receiver, just take whoever's the star receiver out of LSU. It seems to consistently work out pretty
It
great.
seems that way.
Yeah. I mean, he missed a couple games with concussions. He had some issues with drops, which is where he's a lot different from Odell Beckham Jr. If he can clean that up and stay healthy the whole season, I mean, in just 15 games and despite the drafts, he set the NFL rookie record with 109 receptions and he had over
Oh
1,200
yeah.
yards receiving. And I mean, you watch him play, and it's even more impressive than the stats. This guy is a heck of a talent. So they should have something there with him. Now they just need to get the consistency of someone to throw him the ball, and they chose to go with Russell Wilson. It could work out. We've seen Russell Wilson, when put in the right circumstance, be very good. Maybe he still has that if he gets, he's got to stay healthy and be given the opportunity. So that could work out. They brought in James Winston as the backup, which
Mm-hmm.
seems like a solid backup option. They
Yep.
drafted Jackson Dart, which looks like maybe it's potentially a bit of a reach, but he also seems like a developmental quarterback, which means the Giants are playing the long game. They're looking at the long term. At some point, they expect Russell Wilson to, I guess, struggle a bit, and then the next season they'll move on to Jackson Dart. It could be as soon as next year. So we'll see how that plays out, but they clearly want to develop him, and he's the
Mm-hmm.
future. They're just looking to get better, which is what everyone's looking to do this season and build towards something. They Other big question on the offense side of the ball is Andrew Thomas is a great left tackle, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy the past couple of years. And if he
Correct.
can actually stay healthy and those injuries haven't taken their toll, and he's the guy he was a few years ago, I mean, that's a huge difference for that Giants offense and instantly makes them a lot
Sure.
better. So there's potential for the offense to be a lot better, not just better, but a lot better. Defensively, look, Dexter Lawrence, tremendous defensive tackle. He's really good. But the rest of the defense just doesn't look great. They went out and traded multiple draft picks and then gave a massive contract to Brian Burns, who was coming off a season his last year in Carolina, which he wasn't as good as he'd been the previous couple of years. I mean, honestly, for
Yeah.
Carolina, it just felt like an easy move. We're a bad team. He wasn't as good. We get a couple draft picks out of it. Yeah, move him. It made sense. He didn't have any better of a season with the Giants last year than he did with the Panthers a
Nope.
couple years ago. They even lost to his former team when they played the Panthers.
Right.
It just I don't get the moves they're making and just paying him all that money unless he's suddenly going to turn into the player he was a couple years ago. I don't see how that was worth it or a few years ago. They did
That's
win
yeah.
in Seattle against a good Seahawks team, so they do
That was
have
a good game.
potential. Yeah, they have potential to
Yeah.
be a good team based on that. I get it's one game any given Sunday, but there is something there. I would say realistically, the only thing the Giants have going for them beyond that and some of those moves they made is that they actually do have continuity. We're criticizing them for having a continuity, but outside of the Commanders, which we mentioned reasons they may regress, the other two teams, the Eagles and the Cowboys, we just talked about, have turnover. So maybe having continuity in this division is a good thing if we expect the other three teams to not be good enough to win the division. Maybe the Giants just step up. I don't see any chance that happens. I think they're going to be better, but in the long term, I have no optimism about the Giants. It's just a disaster. Again, you're the biggest media market in New York. You're the biggest franchise in that market. It's just disappointing that this is what the product we're getting. I don't have anything else positive to say about them. It's all yours, Nelson.
Yeah, when you got all of New York rooting for the Buffalo Bills, that's a problem because the Giants should be owning that market regardless. So, but first, let's give credit to where credit is due, at least to what is about the New York Giants. They do have, I think an underrated defense at times. You do have some key cogs down there. You got Dexter Lawrence. You know, they drafted Abdul Carter. I think, he's gonna definitely impact immediately. Abdul Carter. He was, nominated a lot and talked about a lot, especially by Kuiper, being this guy could potentially be maybe a generational talent. So we'll see what's going to come from Abdul Carter. But his natural position is defensive end, but he can also play outside linebacker, and that's what the Giants have him listed
Edge
as. So
rusher, modern NFL.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So they're probably going to be playing their standard 3-4 defense throughout the year. Now, even with their defensive strides, which they had last year, and they were ninth in total defense, they were still they still lost a couple of key players, which I did not like about at all. They lost Jason Pinnock. He went to San Francisco. Adoree Jackson, he went to Philly. And as I was saying about, again with Philly earlier, on top of Adoree Jackson, they lost Azeez Ojulari and Patrick Johnson. So it'll be interesting to see if that defense can still carry. Now, if that defense can still carry, Russell Wilson can be successful for these Giants. It's not like he's a bum. We know that the season that he had in Denver was kind of like a mismatch per se with him and Sean Payton. But granted, if you look at his stats, they were above average. They were actually good. It's not like he was underperforming by any means. I just think that Denver was expecting to see a top 5 quarterback in Russell Wilson at his age, coming from Seattle, especially for all those picks for him. And they were expecting him to just blow the doors off. And that's not what happened. Russell Wilson ended up becoming a game manager, but a good game manager per se, right? And we saw him in some games play excellent. It's not like he can't throw the ball. So it'll be interesting to see him in combination with Malik Nabers, as you addressed earlier. I think Malik Nabers, I think he's got a lot of upside. I think he's going to perform very well again this year. And he's going to be a definite beneficiary to a lot of fantasy footballers. I mean, if you drafted him last year, he was definitely giving you points every week. I'll tell you that right now, especially with all those catches when he was
He's a
available.
stud,
So
man.
yeah, no, he is. He's a young stud. I mean,
Yeah.
even when I went to the game, I believe it was the second game of the year, he was putting work on our defense. He
Well,
was
then he had to
making
drop to
Benjamin
cost him
St.
the
Juice
game.
look like
So
toast. Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see. And I think their offensive line, they can improve. I hope they do. I hope, like you said, Andrew Thomas, I hope he does stay healthy because they
absolutely.
need him. And as long as they
Yeah.
have him, I think they can, keep Wilson upright. If not, listen, I don't know if Wilson's going to stay the whole season. I think they might be turning over to Jameis, sooner rather than later. That's just my opinion. Because Wilson, though he can scramble, I just don't think Wilson is per se as fast as he used to be when he was in his younger career days in Seattle. And that's to be fair. Now, they do have some key offensive weapons along to help Wilson too. I mentioned Malik Nabers. They have an excellent, I think, backup in Darius Slayton too at receiver. That he's always
Deep
had
threat.
he has always had the upside to be able to
Yes.
have a couple of catches and be
Yes.
able to score touchdowns and be
Yes.
a factor, especially on
Very
play action
underrated.
passes.
Yep.
So I think Darius Slayton can be an added benefit to Russell Wilson and his capabilities of throwing the
Just
ball.
has to
If
catch
one
the
thing we
football.
know about Russell Wilson, he is one of the better deep ball throwers in the game. And trust me, I know that
Absolutely.
based upon
The moon
2 years ago when he was playing in Denver, and this was I believe game number 3. It was the Commanders versus the Broncos, and Russell Wilson throws a Hail Mary literally from the 45-yard line, and somehow somebody caught it. So, I mean, this guy can drop
Yeah.
these balls in the buckets.
Oh yeah.
That's what he's been always known for. He did it in
Oh
Seattle
yeah.
so many times, for God's sakes, right?
Yep.
And then you have a very underrated running back, in my opinion, in Tyrone Tracy. When you give the ball him in space, he's
Potential.
one of the better. He's one of the better catch catching running backs. I understand he's a little bit small, so maybe he's not so physical. But when you're able to, get the offensive line moving in zone or even counter plays or whatnot, I think that's when Tracy's at his best. So they have players around Russell. They just got to keep the offensive line has to keep him upright, and their defense also has to pull some stops in the games. Now, is this asking a lot for the New York Giants going into the season? I think we can all agree upon that could be the case. Yes, but should we be surprised if the New York Giants are more competitive in these games? No, because you have a veteran now at QB, and you also have weapons around him. So this is definitely an upgrade above what they had with their previous quarterbacks that they had.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what the New York Giants do this season going in. I don't have that crazy high expectations, but I will say to your very first point of what you were talking about, and I think this is why Dayball pulled in Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. He wants to keep his job. And I think the New York Giants fan base, the New York Giants media, they want him gone, period.
I want him
And,
gone.
well, as a Commanders fan for the NFC East, I want the Giants to be successful.
Yeah.
I want this to be one of the better rivalries again in the NFL. Let's be
Yeah.
honest, right? It's also best when the Giants are also on prime time too. So yes, we want to see an upgrade. As Giants fans, they want to see Dayball gone, but this is going to be one of those double-edged swords. What are you going to get out of it? If the Giants bottom out, Dayball might be gone halfway through the season, and Russell Wilson might be benched. But if they're even anywhere near 500 towards halfway through the year, you're putting Mara in a bad position, and he's going to be like, well, I can't even let him go yet. I'm going to have to wait till after the season to even think about it. So it'll be interesting to see. I'll give you the final word.
But I do think that's one of the disappointing parts about this is the Maras are one of the old football ownership families, right? They've passed it down through generations
Yeah,
and kept it in the family. So to see that organization be so bad, we just have higher expectations. And I mean, look, even you mentioned about the quarterbacks. You only won, including a playoff win, 10 games 2 years ago. And you felt so good about Daniel Jones, who hadn't shown any real
yeah.
thing more than a bit of promise. And you decided to pay him all that money. That was destined to be a disaster. And it was. And now you move on from him, eat the dead money. It just, none of the decisions they seem to make are good decisions, and yet they continue to stick with the same personnel in the front office and the coaching staff and do these same things. I don't have any optimism for anything they're doing. I mean, you're right now talking about Brian Dable not even lasting the season. You committed to him. Of course, you need to stick with them for the season, even if it's a disaster. I mean, I'm sorry, but
Absolutely.
I just don't get it. In terms of the running back, yeah, I agree with you that Tyron Tracy, as a star for the full season, a year under his belt now to get some experience, he could be good. There's potential there. He showed some flashes
Right.
of that last
Yeah.
year. There might be
Yes, of
something.
course.
I just don't know that he's going to be great. I don't know. We're counting on him to be the guy. So I would go potential is what's there for him. He gets the opportunity now, and I think that's good for him. He deserves it. He earned it. So we'll see how that plays out. Go ahead, Nelson, and give us your what you think are your pre-training camp projected standings for this division.
Yeah. So the way I'm going to look at the NFC East this year, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are still the best game on roster. Now, the daunting question is, when will this curse be, done and over with the NFC East? I think it might be this year. I still think the Commanders might be potentially one or two steps behind. Last year there was a big gap, I would say, right? But I think potentially with some of the potential weaknesses that I would say Philly could have, especially with the thinning offensive line, and let's not forget too, Lane Johnson also said this is my last year. So that's another key player that they're going to eventually lose. And Lane Johnson did have some nagging injuries that he played last year as well. So it's not like that offensive line is going to be intact, I think, the whole season. Now, again, we were mentioning earlier, and it's just a quick take. How Roseman's excellent. They're going to plug and play, and they should be just fine. but I still think the gap between now Philly and Washington went from this to now a little bit closer. So I think Jaden is now on Jalen Hurts' heels. The way I see it, I think, the Eagles will finish maybe one game or so ahead of the Commanders. And it's literally going to come down to potentially, if the Commanders even jump the Eagles, it's going to come down to the last 3 weeks of the year. And that's where the Commanders are going to have to show that they're the better team in the division. And that's starting with that Saturday on the 20th, I think, in December or something, when they have that special game against the Eagles at home. And then if they have to, face the Eagles in the last game of the year. So that's, if they leap them, that'll be then. Otherwise, I think the Eagles will just be a game or two still in front while the Commanders are closing the gap year after year. I think Dallas will finish third. I kind of lean, if I'm I don't want to say I'm a betting man. I'm not telling anybody here to bet money. But if you're interested in having the idea possibly thinking that the Cowboys could be in the wild card hunt, it's not a bad pick. I think Dak, again, I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFC. I think he'll benefit by staying healthy, and they have a manageable schedule in the first half. So as long as they come above 500, I honestly see potentially, I think the ceiling for them will be about 10 wins. Maybe not, but 10 wins is the ceiling for them, and I could see them potentially knocking on wild card playoff. And that goes to say, too, the Commanders will be in the wild card playoffs as well. And in New York, guys, I mean, I hate to tell you this as a New York fan base. I'm sorry. You guys are still going to be in this purgatory, this dungeon. I can see you guys being, essentially competitive in games, but I think you guys are still far beyond even reaching third best behind Dallas. Dallas has too much more talent than you guys have at this moment. I hope for Dayball's sake, I don't want him to be fired. I think as a human, we can all understand that he should get the whole season, yes. But even if he does get not fired, per se, there's nothing to confirm that Jackson Dart is your franchise quarterback. And with that footnote, you guys could still potentially be in QB purgatory going forward. You guys got to find a way to literally undo everything and somehow bring in, whether that's another quarterback that could be, payout, or essentially maybe even look at an Archie Manning, wink, wink. So we'll see what that happens with there. But that's my outlook with this year in depth.
So I'm going to go ahead and just have fun with it and keep it short and simple. I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys to win the NFC East. I'll have the Philadelphia Eagles in
Oh,
second. Why not?
okay.
The Washington Commanders in third, and the New York Giants again in fourth. Nelson, what is your final word of the day for us?
So I was talking about this actually earlier, guys, and I was talking about Saquon Barkley. So I actually heard this, you know, a couple of days ago, and it did give me pause also to think that to what you were saying too with the Philadelphia Eagles possibly, being dethroned this year, right? So there have been a lot of, not a lot, excuse me. For the last 4 years, we've had rushing kings, but they have not followed up on them next year. And this is not good for Saquon Barkley. So I'm going to just literally go over this briefly. And I'm going to tell you, and I promise you, I don't think Saquon is going to reach the height of what he was, I would say, this year again. Even though, again, their best paper on roster, I honestly don't think Saquon's going to be, he'll reach 80% at the highest of what he did last year. And that's a high ceiling I'll go. Derrick Henry in 2020, he had 378 carries for 2,027 yards, 7 TDs, and he had a 5.4 yard per clip. In 2021, he only had 219 carries, 937 yards, drastic drop off, 10 TDs, and 4.3 yards per carry. Again, I'm going to follow this. It's a trend year after year, year after year since 2020. 2021, Jonathan Taylor had 332 carries for 1,811 yards, 18 touchdowns, 5.5 yards per carry. Again, the trend. 2022, 192 two carries, 861 yards, 4 TDs, 4.5 yards a carry. In 2022, we had Josh Jacobs, the rushing king, 340 carries, 1,653 yards, 12 TDs, nearly 4.9 yards per carry. In 2023, he followed up with 233 carries, 805 yards, 6 TDs, 3.5 yards per clip. Now, the latest running back, Christian McCaffrey, 272 yards, 1,459 yards, 14 touchdowns, 5.4 yards per carry. And obviously, we know what happened to him. He got hurt the next year. So, based upon what I just mentioned to you, Chris, and the rest of the audience, I don't want to say I don't have 100% faith, but odds are not in Saquon's favor to perform the same way he did last year. And let's not forget, for the audience and Chris again, he also mentioned this in OTAs in an interview. He was hinting at possible retirement coming up soon. So he doesn't think that his body is going to last in the next couple of years. So maybe this could be a hint that last year took a big toll on Saquon. So if there's any reason to believe that the Eagles will not be as competitive, I just gave it to you. Chris, you got the last word of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And just really quick to touch on what you said, it is worth noting that every single one of those backs you mentioned got hurt in that follow-up season and missed multiple games and a good number of games in most cases, which is why their numbers, a large part of the reason why their numbers dropped off so drastically. Yeah, so my final word, I want to talk about some rules in sports that I find to be just outlandish. And there's a long list of these, and maybe we'll touch on some of them another time, but I'm going to focus on a few for the sake of this segment. We will start with the bonus in basketball. Watching players shoot free throws at the end of games is not entertaining. Look, at a certain point in time, the team that's winning by a wide margin deserves to win. They earn the right.
Yeah,
Having their possession come down to shooting free throws rather than being able to run an actual possession is absurd. It's ridiculous. I get that Adam Silver, with his education in Durham, they teach you in between cult meetings that watching Mitchell Robinson shoot free throws is great entertainment. It's not actually. It's horrible. We don't want to see that. It would be much more exciting to watch the team inbound the ball every single time and the chaos that goes on with those inbound plays. Let's do that instead. Not to mention, you should be able to consistently inbound the ball, and then you're going to see players start racking fouls and fouling out like crazy and happen quickly, and the game will be over much faster. We're not
yeah,
dragging it
true.
out. Not to mention, it's a lot faster to run an inbounds play than to shoot a couple free throws on the other end every time. It would be far better. And we always talk about keeping teams in games, and now we're bringing it over to football with the NFL, and they have this crazy idea that let's do, the fourth and long or something from deep in their own territory instead of an onside kick. I mean, the bonus in basketball is like the equivalent of if a football team, after every time they scored in the final 2 minutes of the game or in each half, can have the opponent attempt a 30-yard field goal and then would get possession back immediately after that. So the opponent doesn't even get to have a possession; they just get a 30-yard field goal attempt. The fourth down
Makes
thing
sense.
isn't any better. It's moronic. At a certain point in time, again, we need to reward the leading team for winning. But if we really want to find something that prevents teams from being able to just run the clock out, eliminate the kneel down. The kneel down is the dumbest play in football. Get rid of victory formation. It makes no sense. That is boring to watch. Force them to actually have to run a play and hand the ball off and have some crazy drama. I think Mario Cristobal already attempted to protest that a couple years ago against Georgia Tech. I think that's what he was really doing. He wasn't not aware of the rules that he was allowed to kneel down. He was making a
Uh-huh.
protest. He was okay with losing that game to make his protest. Eliminate the kneel. If we're going to allow teams to do that, and they are in a situation where they just want to kneel down, run the clock out, just run the clock out. What is the point? It's just like baseball has in the professional leagues. College hasn't adapted yet. Has moved on to the intentional walk. You don't have to actually throw four balls; they'll just give it to you. But let's talk about
Uh-huh.
that too. Why do we have an intentional walk? Eliminate that altogether. And you can sit there and say, well, what if the pitcher actually throws a four pitch walk without intending to? If a pitcher can throw four consecutive pitches to the same batter without managing to throw one strike at that level, he shouldn't be allowed to come back and pitch the next inning. That should be it for him. Also, why do we allow pitching changes during the inning? We talk about speeding the game up, the pitch clock, and intentional walk, some of these extra inning rules. Eliminate the ability to change pitchers. I don't want to watch them be able to change pitchers. Get rid of the mound visits. I don't want to watch the manager, the pitching coach, the catcher, any of the infielders go talk to the pitcher. I want to see the pitcher rattled, okay? When Aaron Judge comes up to the plate, I want the pitcher to be so rattled, he lofts one right over the plate, and Aaron Judge smacks it 440 feet out of the park. That's what I want. And then I want Aaron Judge to stare him down and rattle that pitcher even more. I want the pitcher to completely unravel right there before our eyes. If we're going to make the game longer, let's have some runs scored. Let's have fun with it. Pitching changes and all these mound visits should not be allowed to happen in the during innings, only in between innings. Let's change some of these rules. Let's make these games more exciting and get rid of the things that are boring to watch and take away
Right.
from rewarding teams for being successful. So that's all we have today for this episode. For all you ladies who tuned in just to see Nelson, and for those of you who don't know how to work your phone and accidentally clicked on this and can't figure out how to turn it off, we want to thank you for tuning in and sticking with us throughout. This has been the first and final word.
Thank you for everyone for tuning in today, and make sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube podcast and other platforms available on Apple, Spotify, and all of our social media pages. Thank you for tuning in.